Don't call an ambulance. Save him first." That desperate plea from a blood-soaked stranger left veterinarian Amelia Chase frozen in the rain-drenched alley. This was no ordinary scene. A man, shot and barely conscious, struggling not for his own life, but to free his German shepherd, whose neck was trapped in a tightening collar. That shocking moment hurled Amelia into a chain of events she never could have predicted. She had no idea the dying man was actually an undercover FBI agent on the run, and that the dog carried a life-or-death secret that could change everything. Every action, every decision Amelia made would decide the fate of all three, caught between trust, betrayal, and pure survival instinct. Where are you watching this video from? What city? What country? Comment below and get ready to dive into this heart-pounding story. Dr. Amelia Chase stepped quickly down the back alley behind the compassion knot, her shoes slapping against slick concrete. Currently, eyes fixed on nothing but the glowing screen of her phone. She tried to shake off the loneliness clinging to her after another silent, exhausting shift, telling herself she was just tired, that the cold drizzle soaking through her coat was nothing new. But the stillness broke apart with a sound that made every nerve in her body jolt, a guttural howl, raw with pain, echoing from the darkness. It was not the whimper of an injured stray or the bark of a frightened pet. It was a sound of desperation too deep to ignore, followed immediately by a harsh clang of metal. Sharp, final, wrong. Instinct warred with caution as she looked down the alley's length, her mind racing through every worst-case scenario a vet could imagine. There, half shrouded in shadow, she caught sight of a German shepherd, its fur matted and glistening from the rain, body tensed and eyes wild. But what stopped her was the scene around the dog. A man slumped beside a dumpster, blood streaming down one arm, fingers slick with crimson as he struggled not to comfort the dog, but to free it from a thick collar digging into its neck. The chain tethered to the wall was twisted and bent, and his hands shook as he fumbled with the old, rusted lock. Each movement left a smear of red on the dog's fur, but the man didn't seem to notice the gash on his own wrist. He was hurting, yet his focus was absolute. He was willing to bleed rather than let the dog choke. Amelia stepped closer, every muscle tight, unsure if she was about to step into something criminal or simply tragic. The air was heavy with fear, not just from the animal, but from the man's taut posture, the way he flinched at every distant sound. She tried to call out, "Do you need help?" But the words died on her lips when the man shot her a look, all hard edges and warnings. There was a wild desperation in his eyes, but not for himself. Help him. That's it. It was a command, not a plea. She hesitated only a moment, then moved toward the dog, her training taking over, even as her mind screamed at her to leave. "Easy, boy. I'm here," she murmured, reaching for the clasp. The dog, Leo, she later learned, trembled but didn't snap, his chest heaving with every strangled breath. As she examined the collar, she realized it had been cinched so tightly that fur had rubbed away, skin broken beneath the metal. The lock was nearly fused shut, ancient and battered, impossible to open without the right key or the man's bloody effort. "You're making it worse," she hissed to the stranger, but he only pressed his bleeding hand over the lock harder, jaw clenched in stubborn silence. The rain hammered harder as Amelia fumbled in her pocket for a penknife, voice shaking. "You're going to pass out," she warned him, but he shot back, "If I do, get him out of here. Promise me that." The urgency in his tone cut deeper than the wound on his arm. She forced herself not to ask questions. There was no time for answers. She slipped the blade between the metal and fur, and with a quick, practiced twist, managed to snap the collar free. Leo lurched forward, almost collapsing into her arms. The man sagged back against the wall, eyes closed, letting out a slow, shaky breath that spoke of both relief and defeat. She reached for her phone, instinct pushing her toward help, but he slapped it away, voice hoarse but unmistakably firm. No hospitals, no police. This never happened. Amelia hesitated, torn between medical urgency and the threat in his eyes. "You're bleeding out," she said flatly, already assessing the wound. He shook his head, jaw clenched. "Help him, not me." She knelt by the dog, working quickly to check for injuries. Her mind cataloged the facts. Leo's breathing was rough but steady. No fresh blood beyond the patch where the collar had cut into his skin. The dog's trust was fragile. He tensed at every movement but didn't pull away. Amelia tried to speak softly. "You're okay, buddy. You're safe now." But her own voice sounded thin, as if she barely believed it herself. She looked up at the man, who pressed his back to the wall, knuckles white around something in his palm. He held it out, a small, battered key, its metal heated almost painfully from being gripped so hard. "Take this," he whispered. "If anything goes wrong, you get him out of here. Do not come back." Amelia glanced at the key, frowning. "This doesn't open the collar," she said, but he only shook his head. "Forget the collar. This is more important." The weight in his words, the urgency behind them, unsettled her. She had spent years learning how to save lives, but nothing had prepared her for a moment like this. A demand for secrecy rather than rescue. She tried again. "I need to stitch your arm. You've lost a lot of blood." The man fixed her with a look that cut through every argument. "I don't care. He gets out, not me. That's all that matters." There was no plea for help, just a raw edge of desperation. "What's going on here? Why me?" she pressed, frustration mounting. He answered without flinching. "Because you're the only one who hasn't run away." His meaning was lost on her, but the conviction in his voice was enough to stop her from pressing further. Her fingers tightened on the key. It wasn't the cheap kind you found with a padlock. She noticed faint letters and an address etched into the side. "Is this an apartment key?" she asked, disbelief coloring her tone. The man nodded once, then doubled over with pain, sweat beading on his forehead. "You need to take the dog and leave. There are people looking for him. You stay. You're in danger." Amelia's jaw set. "And what about you? You think I'm just going to leave you here to bleed out?" His answer was sharp. "If you care about living, yes." Amelia bristled. It was not pity that kept her there, but something closer to defiance. She'd been told all her life not to get involved, to keep her heart guarded, her hands clean. Yet here, at the edge of this man's secrets, she found herself digging in, unwilling to be pushed away. "You don't get to decide that for me," she said, her voice clipped. He closed his eyes, biting back a groan. "I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to make sure no one else pays for my mistakes." There was a crack in his armor now, a glimpse of regret that made her hesitate. She tucked the key into her pocket, weighing its meaning. Why trust her with this? Was it a trap, or did he simply have no one else? Her thoughts whirled as she pressed a makeshift bandage to his arm, ignoring his protests. "You're going to help me, whether you like it or not," she muttered. "You're stubborn," he replied, but there was a flicker of grudging respect. "You don't know the half of it," she shot back. A long silence settled between them, broken only by Leo's soft whine. Then, with a trembling hand, the man reached for her again. "If you see anyone asking about me, you say nothing. You understand?" She nodded once, her mind a blur of unanswered questions. They moved together, Leo limping but alert at her side. Amelia braced herself, shoulders tense and mind reeling, as she struggled to maneuver Ethan's weight. The man's body sagged heavily against her, his steps uneven, but his grip was unyielding. Leo limped alongside, ribs still heaving, and every few seconds he shot worried glances toward the dark mouth of the alley. Amelia's nerves burned with the memory of the delivery van's headlights. Every instinct told her to move faster, to put distance between her, Ethan, and whoever had been watching. But she refused to let panic cloud her judgment. She kept her voice steady. "We have to go now. Can you stand?" Ethan grunted, refusing to show weakness. "Just don't let him take the dog. That's all that matters." His words sharpened her resolve. The van's engine sputtered to a stop, doors groaning open. Amelia's heart raced as the driver stepped out, a tall, wiry man with a face too unreadable for comfort. He approached with a practiced calm, his eyes never leaving Amelia. She forced herself not to look away, not to flinch. The man stopped just a few feet from them, scanning Ethan's bleeding arm and Leo's shaking frame. "Rough night?" he asked, feigning casual concern. Amelia sensed the calculation behind his tone and immediately tightened her hold on Leo's leash. Ethan tried to straighten, voice rough with warning. "You're not with the clinic. Who sent you?" The driver smirked. "Just here to make a delivery." Amelia's fingers closed protectively over the key in her pocket, cold sweat breaking out along her spine. The driver's gaze lingered on Ethan's wounds, and a faint curl appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Looks like you could use a ride to the ER, he suggested, voice oily. Amelia forced a shaky smile. "We'll manage. Thanks." The driver ignored her dismissal, his eyes narrowing, searching for any sign of weakness. He shifted his stance, one hand drifting near his jacket pocket. Leo snarled low in his throat, sensing the tension. Ethan's knuckles went white as he pressed against Amelia for support. She tried to signal with her eyes, "Stay quiet. Stay alert." The standoff seemed endless. Then Ethan swayed, nearly collapsing. Amelia lunged to keep him upright. The driver stepped closer, faking concern, but there was a threat in the set of his jaw. "You look like you're bleeding out, friend. Maybe I should call someone for you?" Ethan glared, voice laced with venom. "Don't bother. No one's coming." His left hand reached up, fumbling with the shoulder of his torn shirt. With a last burst of willpower, he ripped free a small, faded patch and tossed it toward Amelia. The scrap fluttered through the air, landing in her palm. She turned it over. 3 worn letters stared back. FBI. A chill shot through Amelia. The driver's demeanor shifted in an instant. Gone was the friendly facade. His posture tightened, and for a split second, she glimpsed the true reason he was here. Ethan's voice dropped to a strained whisper. "He's not a courier. Run." The urgency jolted Amelia out of her daze. She didn't run. Instead, she seized a desperate idea, spotting the row of controls on the side of the van. As the driver turned, distracted by Ethan's collapse, Amelia darted forward and slammed her fist on the hazard switch. Instantly, the alley was bathed in a cacophony of blaring alarms and strobing lights. The driver spun, momentarily blinded. Leo barked sharply, and Amelia didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ethan under the arms, hauling him backward toward the clinic door. The world shrank to the sound of her own breathing, the chaos behind her, and the pounding in her ears. She dragged Ethan over the threshold, Leo scrambling after, then slammed the door and jammed the deadbolt with a trembling hand. Behind the glass, the driver cursed, pounding once on the door before retreating to his van. For now, they were safe. But Amelia knew the safety was an illusion. The clinic felt transformed, no longer a place of healing, but a battleground. She slid down against the door, catching her breath, while Ethan sagged to the floor. Every ounce of color drained from his face. Leo pressed close to her, eyes wide and uncertain, fur still sticky where the collar had gouged into his neck. Blood pooled beneath Ethan's sleeve, staining the tiles. Amelia forced herself to move, snatching a pair of gloves and a roll of gauze. "You're losing too much blood," she snapped, her tone harder than she meant. Ethan managed a bitter laugh. "You didn't have to stay?" "You still don't." Amelia shook her head. "Not my style." Her hands moved quickly, patching what she could, but the wound was deep and ugly. She fought to keep her anger in check. "What was that patch? Are you really FBI?" Ethan's lips barely moved. "Was. Doesn't matter now." The weight of his words hung in the air, thick with regret. Leo whined, pawing at Amelia's arm, searching for comfort. She stroked his fur with one hand while staunching Ethan's bleeding with the other. Questions crowded her mind, but only one mattered. "Who is after you?" Ethan's eyes flickered. "People who don't forgive mistakes." The reality of the situation settled in. Amelia was no longer a bystander. She was entangled in something dangerous, labeled a possible accomplice just by being here. She tried to make sense of it, but the facts wouldn't line up. The key in her pocket, the FBI patch, the false delivery. None of it made sense, except that none of them were coincidences. She leaned in, searching Ethan's face for any sign of clarity. Why the dog? Why risk everything for him? He looked at Leo, pain etched deep. He's more than evidence. He's the only thing I have left. You're both going to need more than luck to get through this. He grunted, exhausted, but didn't argue. She tended Leo next, peeling away layers of grime to reveal the brutal damage where the collar had bitten deep. Leo bore the pain without a sound, eyes locked on Ethan, as if drawing courage from the battered agent's presence. Amelia stripped off her bloody gloves and grabbed a new set from the shelf, heart pounding with a sense of responsibility that made her hands steady even as her mind screamed for answers. Ethan's presence behind her was quiet but insistent, his gaze fixed on Leo, who was curled up tightly on the exam table, panting hard, muzzle pressed to the edge as if refusing to relax. He comes first. "Promise me," Ethan said, voice raw but demanding. Amelia nodded, already leaning in to examine the angry red line across Leo's side. Her fingers worked methodically, pressing through his fur and feeling the edges of a wound that didn't match anything she'd seen in a typical dog fight or accident. "Did he fall? Was he kicked?" she asked, searching Ethan's face for any flicker of truth. Ethan shook his head, eyes hooded. Not an accident. Someone wanted him restrained. That detail sank in, cold and sharp. She looked back at the torn skin, the bruising that spiraled outward, and realized the injury had come from being yanked and twisted by something brutal, a belt, a leash, maybe even a human hand. Not a cut from glass, not a bite. This was control, suppression. She felt a surge of anger on Leo's behalf, swallowing it down so her hands wouldn't shake. "Hold him steady," she instructed, and Ethan obeyed, pinning Leo gently but firmly. With every touch, Leo whimpered but didn't lash out, his eyes trained on Ethan for reassurance. Amelia cleaned the wound, flushing out grit and traces of dried blood, then reached for sutures. She kept her words clipped, needing control. This wasn't random. Someone tried to break him, physically and mentally. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, and that silence was heavier than any confession. After stitching Leo, Amelia risked a glance at Ethan. "Your turn," she said, but he shook his head, face ashen. "I'll live." He might not. She snapped back. "You'll bleed out if you keep acting tough." She pressed him into the chair, forcing herself not to look away from the blood spreading across his shirt. When she peeled the fabric back, her breath caught. There was the obvious gunshot wound, ugly, cauterized at the edges. But there was something else. The bullet had left an odd pattern in the torn flesh, and as she wiped away more blood, she found the edge of something metallic, smooth, and unnatural, just beneath the skin. "What is this?" she demanded, voice rising. Ethan winced, refusing to meet her gaze. "Get it out," he said simply. Amelia hesitated, but the injury was too severe for caution. She steadied her hands and worked quickly, cutting through muscle and tissue to reveal a small, cylindrical object, shiny, almost surgical, threaded through with a couple of coarse stitches, as if it had been sewn in during some frantic makeshift operation. She extracted it with tweezers, her brow furrowed in disbelief. "You let someone sew a lock into your body?" she asked, voice incredulous. Ethan grimaced, sweat standing out along his hairline. Had to keep it safe. No one else could know. Amelia wiped blood from her fingers, examining the object. A miniature lock made of titanium, light but solid. The sort you'd expect on a safety deposit box or a specialized piece of equipment. Her mind flashed to the key still hidden in her pocket, the one Ethan had pressed into her hand during the chaos outside. "You're hiding something," she said, accusation and wonder mixing in her tone. "Is this what they're after? Is Leo involved in all of this?" Ethan looked away, jaw clenched. He's not just a witness, he's the reason. That answer made no sense, but Amelia didn't have the luxury of demanding more. She dropped the lock into a sterile tray, mind racing. Whatever was inside it, whatever secrets Ethan had bled to protect, they were now in her hands too. She pressed gauze to Ethan's wound, wrapping it tightly while Leo whimpered beside them, unable to tear his gaze away from the man. "You two are a mess," Amelia muttered, not expecting an answer. She cleaned up quickly, nerves raw, then returned to the lock, turning it over in her palm. searching for any identifying marks. If you want me to help, you need to start telling me the truth. Whose lock is this? What's inside? Ethan let out a low breath, the sound heavy with defeat. You really want to help? Don't open it. Not yet. Not until you're sure who's watching. He coughed, blood on his lips, but the look in his eyes was clear. Some things are worth dying for. Some things you have to keep locked away, even from yourself. Amelia didn't argue. She cleaned and dressed the wound as best she could, noticing the telltale signs of fever starting to build in Ethan's face. She reached for antibiotics, voice steady. You're burning up. Infection will kill you faster than a bullet. Take these. Ethan was stubborn to the point of recklessness, and Amelia realized it would be a fight to get him through the next hour. Sweat streaked his brow. Yet when she reached for the anesthetic, he shook his head, voice tight. No meds. I need to be clear. If this goes wrong, you run. She stared at him, incredulous. You want me to dig into your side for a chunk of metal with nothing? His gaze didn't waver. Just promise me you'll play normal. 24 hours, you do nothing out of the ordinary. No calls, no visitors, no notes. Pretend I'm not here? Amelia bristled at the absurdity of it, but in the raw look in his eyes she saw a fear that had nothing to do with pain. She forced a breath out, grabbing a scalpel and forceps. Fine, but you better keep your end of the bargain and not die on my table. He offered a ghost of a smile, then gripped Leo's collar with white knuckles, jaw locked as she went to work. The room filled with nothing but the harsh sounds of her tools and Ethan's ragged breathing. She worked quickly, careful, and unflinching, determined not to let his stoic front slip into shock or panic. Blood welled and spilled, but she ignored it, eyes locked on the strange line of stitches buried in the wound. She cut through the suture, feeling the metallic scrape against her tweezers, then pried free the small titanium lock, now slick with his blood. The sight of it up close chilled her more than she expected. This wasn't a tool or a key. It was a container, something designed to hide, not secure. She braced for the expected. A chip, a drive, a message. Instead, when she twisted it open, something dropped into her gloved palm with a faint metallic clink. A tarnished silver ring, old but lovingly polished, fell out, the inside engraved with 3 letters, ELA, and a date, blurred by time but still legible. Amelia stared, stunned by the contrast between the danger swirling around them and this quiet, heartbreakingly human relic. She looked to Ethan for answers, but he refused to meet her eyes. You risked your life to keep a ring inside your body? She demanded, her voice caught between anger and awe. Ethan's breath came heavy. It's all I had left that mattered. Everything else can be replaced. The words hung in the air, rough as sandpaper. Amelia wanted to push further, but he cut her off with a motion toward her watch. Can you set that back? 15 minutes. She blinked, thrown by the abruptness of the request. Why? His lips twisted in something almost like a smile. If they're tracking me, they're tracking time. Give them the wrong time zone and maybe I get another shot. She hesitated but obliged, twisting the crown of her cheap plastic watch until the numbers rolled back. He watched her closely, measuring her loyalty, then seemed to relax a fraction. Leo pressed in, resting his muzzle on Ethan's lap, drawing comfort from his steady presence. Amelia dropped the ring and lock into a fresh, sterile pouch, tucking them away in her supply drawer. You know this is insane, right? She said, forcing a note of levity to mask the churn in her gut. Ethan gave a short laugh, already fading. It's the only plan I have left. The admission was honest and hollow, a man out of options and running on hope. She cleaned the wound, bandaged it as best she could, and loaded Ethan up with antibiotics. His eyes glazed with exhaustion, but he refused to let himself go under. No visitors, Amelia. You stick to routine. Feed the dog, buy coffee, answer the phone like nothing's changed. She nodded, already committing it all to memory. Every instruction was a code, every action a layer of protection against whatever shadow was hunting them. The room seemed to shrink, thick with secrets. Amelia finished packing her tray, but the air was tense, coiled for trouble. Leo whined, shifting closer, sensing the threat pulsing beneath the surface. Amelia looked at Ethan, then down at the ring again. Who was she? Ethan's jaw worked. The answer caught between confession and regret. The person I couldn't save. The only reason I kept running. She felt the ache in those words, the way guilt can anchor a person to a life they never wanted. You don't owe me your story, she said softly. He shook his head. Not now. Maybe when it's over. A sudden flash of headlights slashed across the frosted glass at the back of the clinic, breaking the fragile calm. Amelia stiffened, every nerve on edge. She pulled the curtain and lowered her voice. If it's the van again, what do I do? Ethan forced himself upright, sweat beading on his forehead. You stay normal. You don't open the door unless you have to. If they force you, you give them what they want. Except the ring. You never let that go. His eyes, fever bright but clear, locked on hers. Promise me, Amelia. She didn't hesitate. I promise. Amelia kept her head low as she led Ethan and Leo across the street to her cramped apartment, a worn-out unit facing the back alley and the dull glow of the clinic sign. The adrenaline of the last hours hadn't faded. It just shifted, sharpening her senses, making every movement feel watched. Once inside, she double-locked the door and helped Ethan sink onto the sagging sofa, while Leo curled protectively at his feet. Amelia checked her phone for missed calls, deleted every recent message, then stuffed it into a drawer, mind replaying every warning Ethan had whispered. You can't stay at your house, he said quietly. They'll check every address tied to your name. His tone made it clear this was no longer a request. She moved through her tiny apartment, drawing the blinds halfway, feeling the weight of paranoia settling in. Ethan watched her, calculating but quieter now, as if rationing his words. He nodded to the windows. Don't just close them. Check for anything reflective, lenses, a flash, a shadow where it shouldn't be. Amelia hesitated, uncertain, but followed his instructions. She scanned each pane of glass, studying corners and angles, looking for glimmers that didn't belong. Her hands felt clumsy, but her eyes caught something odd, a pinpoint of red in the molding above the bathroom window. Is this what you mean? She asked, voice tight. Ethan forced himself upright, favoring his stitched side. That's not yours. Someone's already inside the building. A fresh wave of dread hit her. She yanked the small device free and smashed it in a towel, her hands trembling. Ethan didn't even flinch. They're not after you, they want me, but if you give them a reason, they'll make you a target. That's why you act like everything is normal. Leo's ears perked, reading the tension in the room. Amelia struggled to process the new threat. They're not coming with guns? Ethan shook his head. Not these people. They want leverage. They use data, not violence. If you had anyone, family, friends, a partner, they'd already know. But you're alone. That's the only thing that's keeping you alive. That last part cut deeper than she expected, but there was no time for feelings. So what do I do? She asked, trying to force her voice steady. Ethan reached for the old bag she'd carried from the clinic, pulling out a battered notebook. You keep routines. Buy coffee at the usual place. Walk Leo at the usual hour. Never deviate. If you make them wonder why you're acting strange, they'll dig. All you have to do is look boring. His words were clinical, but she could tell the rules were hard-won, shaped by years of looking over his shoulder. You're asking me to play dead, she muttered. Ethan gave a faint nod. The only way to survive is to disappear in plain sight. Amelia looked around her apartment, suddenly hyper-aware of the emptiness. There was nothing to give her away. No framed family photos, no souvenirs from childhood, just stacks of veterinary journals and a single worn blanket on the futon. What if they're already watching? She asked. Then we make it a show, Ethan replied. You act like you have nothing to hide. And if someone comes to the door, you're polite, but you don't invite them in. Ever. Leo, sensing her distress, nudged her hand, grounding her for a moment. Ethan shifted on the couch, voice lower, almost conspiratorial. They're patient. They'll wait for a slip. But they're also arrogant. If you act harmless, they'll move on to softer targets. Amelia managed a small, bitter laugh. Good thing I've had years of practice being invisible. Ethan smiled for the first time since they met. That's your edge. You're not a threat. But if they realize you're helping me, it's over for both of us. He tapped the notebook. If anything happens, there are numbers in here you call, but not unless you have no other option. They fell into a tense silence, broken only by the soft breathing of Leo as he rested his head on Ethan's knee. Amelia's thoughts spun with every possible outcome, but she clung to the one thing she could control, her routine. She would act like nothing had changed. She would buy her coffee, answer emails, clean the kitchen, and walk Leo. No one watching from behind a hidden lens would see anything out of the ordinary. Ethan's warning echoed, "They use fear. You fight back by refusing to show any." As the evening dragged on, Ethan grew restless. He stood with effort, gestured for Amelia to help him to the window, and scanned the alley with careful, methodical movements. Look for reflections that don't belong. Glare where there's no light source. Okay. Sometimes it's nothing more than a glint from a bottle, but sometimes it's a camera lens. She followed his line of sight, seeing nothing but shadows and dull neon. "You sound like you've done this before," she said. He didn't answer, just kept searching, eyes hard. He turned from the window suddenly sharp. "If you feel watched, you probably are. But most people ignore that feeling until it's too late. You don't get that luxury anymore." Amelia swallowed hard. "Why did you trust me?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze, his expression flat but honest. "Because you didn't run. You could have left me in that alley, but you stayed. That means something." Leo let out a soft sound, as if in agreement. Amelia tried to brush off the compliment, but she knew she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Ethan lowered himself onto the couch, tension etched into every movement. "They'll come back. Or maybe they're already in the building, waiting for a sign. All you can do is keep your head down and wait it out." She nodded, feeling her resolve harden. "I can do that," she said, but her stomach twisted with every step she took toward normalcy. Amelia checked her reflection in the smudged glass of the pharmacy window before stepping back out onto the street, a bag of medical supplies tucked under her arm. She practiced a faint smile, replaying the steps Ethan had drilled into her head. Look tired. Look distracted, but never look scared. Every step back to her apartment was measured. Part of a script she was desperate not to fumble. Leo kept close to her side, his leash tight in her fist. It almost felt normal, except for the fact that she counted every window, every camera, every stranger who held her gaze. A beat too long. She returned to the old apartment building, careful to hold the grocery bag at just the right angle, and nod to the familiar faces in the hall. Reaching her door, she stopped short. An elderly woman in a bright floral dress was waiting, balancing a plate of cookies and a plastic bag. "You must be the new girl," the woman said, voice warm and strong. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, 2 doors down. I just wanted to check in." Amelia forced a polite smile, suppressing the panic that surged up. "Thank you. That's very kind. I've just moved in. It's been a lot." Mrs. Peterson pressed the plate into her hands with a knowing look. "I saw you coming and going last night. You seemed a bit tense. I always bake ginger cookies for my neighbors. Helps calm the nerves. Doctor's orders." The casual phrase nearly made Amelia flinch. She tried to keep her response light. "I'll have to trust your prescription." Before she could open a door, Mrs. Peterson leaned closer. "I do hope you're settling in. If you need anything, tools, a ride, or even someone to talk to, you knock on my door. We look after each other here." Amelia thanked her again, trying not to glance at the clock or at the bag of bandages, or let her eyes dart toward the closed blinds. She fumbled with her keys, wishing Mrs. Peterson would go, but the woman's presence was oddly grounding, a flash of something almost normal in a day that had been anything but. Mrs. Peterson finally nodded and began to walk away. Then she paused, turning back with a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, by the way, did you happen to see a little drone outside your window last night? I thought I saw something buzzing around, but maybe it was just the reflection off the streetlights." Amelia's heart skipped. She forced herself to shrug, to sound mildly curious but not alarmed. "No, I didn't notice. Probably just kids playing." Mrs. Peterson gave her a long look, then nodded, satisfied with her answer. "Well, let me know if you see it again. These days you never know who's watching." Amelia managed to slip inside and lock the door before her mask cracked. She dropped the cookies on the counter and rushed to Ethan, who was sitting rigid on the sofa. She said she saw a drone outside last night, Amelia whispered, panic rising. Ethan's face darkened, his jaw clenching. Did she seem suspicious? Amelia shook her head, her words tumbling out. She was friendly. A little too interested maybe, but I don't think she knows anything. She offered cookies. She noticed I looked tense. Ethan shot a look at Leo, then at the plate. Don't eat anything until we're sure it's safe, he muttered. And keep an eye on her. Sometimes it's not the obvious threats that get you. Sometimes it's the ones who act like they care. Amelia nodded, understanding the warning behind his words. She tried to steady her hands as she unpacked the bandages and painkillers, checking each item like it could be a listening device. Leo paced restlessly, ears flicking with every sound from the hallway. Ethan leaned in, voice low. If they're flying drones, it means they're not ready to make a move. They're still gathering intel. We have to keep acting normal, or they'll know we're on to them. Amelia laughed bitterly. Normal? I can barely remember what that feels like. Ethan's tone softened, just for a moment. You're doing better than you think. Most people would have cracked by now. Amelia hesitated, then glanced back toward the door, wondering if Mrs. Peterson was listening from the other side. What do we do if she comes back? Ethan replied without hesitation. You offer her tea. You talk about the weather. You thank her for the cookies. But you don't let her in, not ever. Amelia nodded, repeating the rules to herself, grounding her fear in routine. Her mind spun with questions. Was Mrs. Peterson truly just a nosy neighbor, or did her cookies hide something more sinister? Could the drone have belonged to some neighborhood kid, or was it a scout for someone much worse? Leo nudged her hand as if to say he felt the tension too. You smell anything strange? She whispered to him, trying to lighten the mood. Leo just wagged his tail, eyes trained on Ethan. Even as Amelia performed every mundane task, feeding Leo, folding laundry, scrolling aimlessly through news feeds, her nerves remained taut. She caught herself watching the clock, counting down minutes until the sun set, and the building went quiet. Every knock in the hallway sent a spike of adrenaline through her, but no one else came to the door. The cookies sat untouched on the counter, a symbol of either kindness or warning. That night, as Amelia double-checked the locks and drew the blinds, Ethan spoke quietly. People think danger comes with a gun or a knife, but sometimes it bakes you cookies and asks about the weather. Don't trust the obvious threat. It's the ones who know how to blend in you need to fear. Amelia agreed, her voice steady. I'll watch her. I'll watch everyone. She settled on the edge of the futon, sleep nowhere in sight, thinking about drones, neighbors, and how trust could be a weapon. Leo curled at her feet, eyes never closing. His loyalty, the only thing she didn't question. Amelia stared at the plate of cookies, trying to decide if it was a peace offering or a test. Ethan woke before dawn, uneasy and restless, scanning the room as if expecting a threat to burst through the door at any moment. The plate of ginger cookies still sat on the counter, untouched. He picked up one and broke it in half, sniffing the crumbs and eyeing them suspiciously before popping a piece into his mouth. No poison, he said, voice gruff, but don't let your guard down. Sometimes the deadliest things look like comfort. Amelia watched him, her own nerves frayed, clutching a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. You think the drone was really about us? She asked. Ethan nodded, not taking his eyes off the window. They don't waste tech on old ladies or empty apartments. Someone wants to know who you're sheltering. His gaze drifted to Leo, who lay quietly under the table, nose twitching, ever alert to the mood in the room. Amelia reached down and scratched Leo behind the ears, searching for some of the calm that always seemed to radiate from the dog. You said last night he wasn't just evidence. He's the reason. Ethan sat heavily in the chair, shoulders tense, his composure cracking for the first time. He saved my life, not with his teeth or speed, but by keeping me sane when everything else fell apart. The job, the secrets, losing ELA. Without Leo, I would have snapped. Amelia studied him, caught off guard by the raw honesty. He's not just your partner then. Ethan shook his head. He's the last thing tying me to who I was before all this. They want him because he's the only thing that proves I didn't betray them. But to me, he's not a tool. He's my anchor. I keep going because if I don't, he'll fall too. His words hung heavy in the room. The bond between man and dog laid bare in a way that made even Amelia feel exposed. She took a deep breath, trying to switch gears. So what now? We keep hiding? Ethan shook his head, looking determined. No. We need to muddy the waters. I need you to take Leo back to the clinic. Make it look like nothing's changed. People expect you to be there caring for animals. A woman walking a German Shepherd down the street? Nobody notices that. But a man hiding in a stranger's apartment, wounded and paranoid, that raises flags? Leo knows what to do. If you get stopped, you tell the truth. He's recovering. You're his vet. You've done this 100 times. Amelia hesitated, sensing the danger. What if they recognize him? Ethan answered flatly. That's the risk. But he's got skills. He can protect you in a way I can't right now. Amelia eyed Leo, suddenly understanding the depth of his training. What exactly can he do? Ethan's lips pressed thin. He can sense changes in body language. He knows when someone's lying, when they're afraid, when they want to hurt you. I didn't teach him tricks. I taught him how to survive, how to trust his instincts and watch the people around him. He's better at reading a room than I am. The admiration in his voice was unmistakable, but beneath it was an undercurrent of fear. You have to trust him, Amelia. And you have to trust yourself. If something feels wrong, walk away. Amelia nodded, committing the plan to memory. She slipped on her coat, clipped the leash onto Leo's collar, and made sure her face betrayed nothing but fatigue. People might notice a man bleeding, but they never question a vet with a sick dog, she said, repeating Ethan's earlier words. He nodded approval, then reached into his bag and produced a second key. Sleek, cool, unfamiliar. Change of plans. You're not going to the clinic. If you're followed, you take Leo to this address instead. Amelia turned the key over, reading the faint numbers etched into the side. What is this place? Ethan's expression closed off instantly. Safe house. If things go south, don't come back here. You'll know what to do. The implication hung in the air, chilling her resolve but sharpening her focus. And the ring? She pressed, voice low. You owe me at least that. Ethan's face went hard, the shutters slamming down over his grief. Some things are safer if you don't know. Just keep it hidden, please. Amelia nodded, stung but understanding the limits of trust. Leo stood and pressed his nose to her hand, ready for whatever came next. She knelt, looking into his steady eyes. You watch my back, I'll watch yours. Deal? Leo's tail thumped softly, the unspoken promise clear. Before leaving, Amelia checked the windows one last time for glimmers or shadows, heart pounding at the thought of drones or strangers watching. She moved through the routine, shoes, leash, keys, wallet, each step rehearsed to appear mundane. Ethan's voice stopped her at the door. If you see anything, anyone, don't be a hero. Leo will know. Trust his lead. Amelia glanced at Ethan, reading the desperation in his instructions. Don't die while I'm gone, she said, a sad smile tugging at her lips. Ethan shrugged, but his eyes gave away the fear he tried so hard to hide. She stepped out, Leo at her side, blending into the morning flow of the city. Amelia's grip tightened around the leash as she and Leo arrived at the nondescript building listed on the second key. Her pulse thundered with every step up the narrow staircase. The street below looked like any other in the city, but the quiet tension in the air told her this place was different. She checked the key, matching the numbers to the door, and let herself in, bracing for anything. The apartment on the other side was immaculate, with a stillness that made her skin crawl. There were no signs of recent life, no dirty mugs, no shoes, no scent of another person. Yet everything was perfectly in order, right down to the mail stacked on the side table. Leo circled twice, then settled near the door, alert but not agitated. She moved further in, absorbing details. There was a sleek desk against one wall, a laptop docked and powered down, and an old rotary phone next to a battered phone book. Along the opposite wall hung a massive map, peppered with pins, colored string, and cryptic notes. Amelia caught herself staring at it, feeling out of place in this world of surveillance and strategy. On a low shelf, she spotted a framed photo turned face down, and next to it, a jewelry box. The sense of trespass made her hesitate, but curiosity won out. She flipped the photo, seeing a much younger Ethan beside a woman with gentle eyes. Between them, a German shepherd, Leo, unmistakably younger, sat, tongue lolling, eyes bright. Amelia swallowed hard, realizing just how deep she'd been drawn into Ethan's story. She turned her attention to the jewelry box and, with trembling fingers, opened it. The silver ring glinted under the harsh light, instantly recognizable. She placed it back and reached for a battered notebook tucked behind the frame. She didn't flip through the pages, respecting privacy she had never been offered, but a scrawled message inside the front cover caught her eye. Protection contract, protect L.A. at all costs. Her mind raced. L.A., the same initials engraved in the ring. The same 3 letters Ethan had muttered in his sleep. A knot formed in Amelia's stomach. Was L.A. a person, a code, or both? She glanced at Leo, suddenly aware that the dog's steady presence meant more to Ethan than simple companionship. In a world where everyone else could be compromised, Leo was the only witness to Ethan's old life, the only thread tying him to a promise. That ring was more than a memento. It was a vow. The room, sterile and untouched, didn't feel like a safe house at all. It felt like a shrine to someone lost, a time Ethan was desperate to protect. Needing answers, Amelia scanned the walls for further clues and spotted a list of phone numbers on a whiteboard. One was labeled, "Emergencies Only." Adrenaline made her hands shake as she picked up the rotary phone and dialed, bracing for a stranger's voice. When the line clicked, it wasn't a recording or an operator. It was Ethan, his voice ragged but immediately on alert. "You made it. Good. Is Leo with you?" Amelia confirmed, her relief tinged with frustration. "We're here. The place is different. It's like you never left, but you're never coming back." Ethan didn't answer that, just asked, "Did you see the ring?" She hesitated, then admitted, "I know it meant something." L.A. Who is that, Ethan? Why is everything about her? His silence stretched, then broke. She was my wife. Everything I did, every lie I told, was to protect her. Even after she died, they still wanted what she knew. I couldn't let them have it. That room was our life, and Leo is the only part of it I could save. The confession stunned Amelia. For a moment, she forgot the danger outside, focusing only on the grief and devotion that shaped Ethan's every action. The contract, she pressed. "What does it mean?" Ethan's voice dropped. "It's my oath. Not to the agency, not to the job, but to her. You have to keep Leo safe now. If anyone tries to use him, you leave. No second chances." Amelia glanced at Leo, understanding for the first time that she wasn't just protecting a wounded agent or a traumatized dog. She was guarding a living piece of someone's soul. Trying to ground herself, she said, "There's a number on the wall. What happens if I call it?" Ethan's reply came faster than she expected. "Only use it if you're cornered. It's the last safety net. Otherwise, you wait. You keep the routine, and you keep the ring hidden." Amelia nodded, even though he couldn't see her. The enormity of the trust settled on her shoulders. Amelia gripped the phone, heart pounding, as the connection clicked and a deep, practiced voice answered. "Amelia Chase. I was expecting your call." The familiarity in his tone sent chills through her, but she pushed down her nerves and replied evenly, "You know where I am." Then there was no hesitation. "I know everything I need. You've come far, but there's only one way out for you and that dog. I can get you out of this, but you'll need to cooperate." Amelia's mind raced as she pieced together the facts. This was no stranger, but David Cross, a senior FBI agent, Ethan's old partner, the very man who had given her this emergency number. She measured every word, forcing herself not to betray fear. "You're offering me a way out. What's the price?" Cross let out a cold laugh. "You have something I want. The key. Not the dog, not the ring, not the memories. Just the key to Ethan's old apartment. Give it to me, and you'll have a way out. A chopper, safe passage. Your life and Leo's. It's cleaner than the alternatives." The implication hung in the air, ugly and final. Amelia squeezed her eyes shut for a second, then forced herself to focus. And if I refuse? Cross didn't hesitate. Then you and your little secret go down with Ethan. Your face is already flagged. I know about the clinic, the alley, the safe house. If you care about survival, don't get righteous. Do the smart thing. Amelia steadied her breathing, remembering Ethan's warning that the worst threats always sounded reasonable. I don't get it. Your FBI? Why sell out your own? The silence that followed was heavy. Then Cross's voice came back, clipped and bitter. You think this was about greed? My son was taken. They told me I'd never see him again unless I handed over Ethan's files. I did what any parent would. I made a choice. Ethan was already a dead man to them. The words landed hard, but Amelia heard something else. A fracture in the certainty, a trace of regret. She pressed further. So you betrayed the oath, your partner, and all of us. And you think I'll just give you what you want? Cross grew cold. You have no leverage, Dr. Chase. You're out of time. But Amelia's mind was racing ahead, seeing not just the immediate danger, but the way out. Maybe I do, she countered. Maybe I have something even you can't control. In her other hand, she held Ethan's battered notebook, her thumb brushing over the page with a cryptic code, a string of numbers Ethan had called a failsafe. She spoke clearly into the receiver. You're not the only one who knows how to make a deal. If you hurt us, this information goes public, you want to keep your son safe, then call off your men and get out while you can. Cross's breathing sharpened. You're bluffing. But she didn't waver. I'm broadcasting the code to every news channel and federal server I can find. In 10 minutes, they'll all know exactly what you did, and every agent in the Bureau will be hunting you. Make your choice, David. There was a long, dangerous pause, then a muted curse. Cross tried again, desperation creeping in. You don't know what you're doing. This will get us all killed. Amelia's resolve crystallized. I'm not the one who broke faith first. You did. I won't sell out my friends to save myself. In that instant, she hit send on her burner phone, pushing the encrypted failsafe code to every journalist and law enforcement tip line on Ethan's list. The silence on the line was replaced by chaos outside. Sirens, engines, radios blaring. Amelia ducked low, pulling Leo close, bracing for the backlash. Through the window, she saw the building across the street flood with tactical lights. The world shifted. Cross's voice, ragged and betrayed, was the last she heard before hanging up. You don't know what you've done, but she did. She'd chosen loyalty over fear, even if it meant burning every bridge. It happened quickly. FBI units swarmed the street. Agents in tactical gear swept up the stairs, and when the pounding on her door came, Amelia had already destroyed the last of Ethan's notes, keeping only the ring and Leo's leash. They entered, guns up, but a second team stormed the apartment down the hall, tackling a man with a duffel bag. David Cross, caught red-handed, cursing and sobbing, his mask shattered. One agent stepped in, eyes sharp, weapon lowered. You're Dr. Chase? Ethan's safe. Your friend did the right thing. We'll take it from here. She nodded, relief and exhaustion flooding her system. But her mind was on Ethan, the one still fighting to survive while she played games of trust and betrayal. Only when the chaos outside faded did Amelia realize the immediate threat was gone. Cross had been desperate, but the Bureau had been watching too, and Ethan's last failsafe had worked. The cost, however, was written in every shake of her hands. She clipped Leo's leash, and with the agent's blessing, slipped out the side entrance, never looking back as Cross was dragged into the daylight. Her thoughts spun ahead. Ethan was still in danger, his injuries still grave, and the promises she had made still hanging in the air. But now, at least, the choice was hers. She hurried toward the place where she and Ethan had first crossed paths, heart pounding with the knowledge that survival was never a solo act. It was always about who you could trust when the world closed in. The city felt different now, stripped of illusions but brimming with possibilities. Leo pressed close, reading her worry but offering strength. Amelia tightened her grip, whispering to him, "Not much further, buddy. We're almost home." The past wasn't done with them yet, but for the first time she saw a way forward. Not through bargains or secrets, but through stubborn, simple faith. There was still a life to save, a promise to keep, and an old wound waiting for its chance to heal. The drive out of the city was a blur of tension and anticipation. Amelia kept one eye on the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a black SUV tailing them, but the only companions on the winding mountain road were the tall pines and the occasional burst of sunlight cutting through clouds. Ethan slept in the back seat, feverish and pale, Leo wedged protectively at his side, nose pressed against his hand as if anchoring him to this world. The city's noise faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of tires on old asphalt and the soft huffs of Leo's breath. With every mile, the burden of secrecy felt a little lighter, but the weight of responsibility grew. They reached the cabin by late afternoon, guided not by GPS, but by the crude map and the memory of Ethan's handwriting. The house itself was nothing like Amelia expected. Weathered logs, a sloping tin roof, a crooked porch swing, and stacks of split wood lining the path. No cameras, no motion sensors, just wild grass and the faint, earthy scent of pine needles crushed underfoot. It was not the fortress she imagined, but a refuge built by someone desperate to leave the world behind. Leo leapt from the car, tail high, then hesitated, as if confirming the territory. When the dog bounded toward the porch, Ethan finally stirred. Managing a weak smile, he always remembers the way, even after all this time. Amelia supported Ethan as they entered, surprised by the gentle hush that settled over them. The cabin was sparsely furnished, a battered armchair, a wood stove, a simple kitchen, and a faded quilt tossed over a narrow bed. On one wall hung a collection of old photographs, an Ethan with Leo as a pup, a woman with laughing eyes, and handwritten notes, yellowed by age. The past lingered here, raw and unresolved. Leo immediately claimed his spot near the hearth, curling up with a sigh as if he too remembered why this place mattered. Amelia helped Ethan onto the bed, fetching cool water and fresh bandages. She worked in silence, aware that here, in the quiet, there was no more hiding behind routine or pretense. As she cleaned his wounds, Ethan's composure faltered. "I never thought I'd bring anyone here again," he said, voice low. "This was supposed to be my escape, not a shelter for fugitives." Amelia shook her head, unable to hide the affection in her tone. "It's not a prison. It's the first place you've let yourself be human." Ethan met her gaze, something shifting in his expression. "You know why I always pushed people away? It wasn't pride or caution. I was scared that if I ever found a real home, I'd have to admit how much I needed one." The confession settled between them, heavier than any secret he'd shared. Amelia pressed a fresh compress to his side, her touch gentle. "You don't have to run anymore, Ethan. Not from them, not from yourself." Leo padded over, laying his head on Ethan's chest, eyes closing in perfect trust. Ethan's hand found the dog's ear and stroked it absently, voice barely above a whisper. He's the only one who never judged, never left. Sometimes I think I survived just because I had to be worthy of him. Night crept in quickly. Amelia built a fire, the crackling warmth filling the room with a comfort she hadn't realized she missed. They ate in silence, soup and bread, with Leo chewing contentedly on an old toy rescued from the cabin's single drawer. Amelia watched Ethan, noting how the lines of worry eased in the golden firelight. "This is where you came to heal, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded, gaze distant. "After every case, every loss, I came here to remember who I was supposed to be, to promise myself I'd do better, but I never let anyone stay, not even her." He fell silent. The memory of his wife and their life before secrets pressed close. Amelia sat beside him, sharing the silence, feeling her own armor slip. The city's relentless pace was gone. Here, in this fragile stillness, she could see how hard Ethan had fought to stay whole. The world had asked too much of him, and still he'd tried to protect what little good he had left. "I'm not leaving," she said simply, the promise ringing with its own conviction. "Not because you're a hero or because I owe you anything, but because I see what you're fighting for. I want to fight for it too." Ethan's eyes shone with gratitude and something like relief. Leo climbed between them, tail thumping, nudging Amelia's hand until she laughed. The tension that had knotted them together in fear slowly unraveled, replaced by something gentler, more enduring. "You can't keep running from the idea of home," she whispered, echoing the lesson she'd only just learned herself. Sometimes the only way to survive is to let someone stay. The flames flickered lower, shadows dancing on the old photographs, and the world beyond the woods faded away. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was the silent vow they'd all made, to protect one another, to share the burden, to keep hope alive even when it felt foolish. Leo's breath was steady, Ethan's pain eased, and Amelia finally let herself believe they might be safe, at least for tonight. Dawn would come soon enough, with new challenges and old ghosts, but for now, in the quiet heart of the pines, she chose to stay. The first morning at the cabin was marked by a silence that felt new, almost intimidating after weeks of running, sirens, and threats lurking around every corner. Amelia woke to birdsong and the steady weight of Leo pressed against her legs, a reminder that she was no longer alone in her vigilance. The wound on Ethan's side had stopped bleeding, but he still moved slowly, stiff with pain and with the wariness of a man unused to being cared for. Amelia didn't ask permission. She simply brought him water, checked his fever, and eased him to the battered kitchen chair to change his dressings. Day by day, routine replaced fear. Ethan surrendered to her ministrations, at first out of necessity, but gradually out of trust. She washed his hair in a tin basin, humming old tunes to distract him from the discomfort, and he let her, eyes closing, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. At night, she insisted on making soup, propping him up with pillows so he could eat without strain, and when his hands shook, she helped steady the spoon. The change was subtle, unspoken, each act of care building a new layer of safety neither of them had felt in years. Leo, sensing the difference, became softer, his old vigilance replaced by a gentle protectiveness. He followed Amelia from room to room, tail wagging when she knelt to brush his coat, pressing his head into her lap. One afternoon, as sunlight pooled on the wooden floor, Amelia sat by the hearth, running the brush through Leo's thick fur. The dog's body relaxed under her touch, eyes drifting shut, and a deep sigh rumbled through him. Ethan watched from across the room, captivated. It was a scene so ordinary, so gentle, that it brought an ache to his chest. "He trusts you," Ethan said quietly. More revelation than praise. "He hasn't done that for anyone in a long time." Amelia smiled, setting aside the brush, her hands lingering on Leo's side. "Animals know when they're safe. People do too, if they let themselves." She looked at Ethan, her gaze steady. "I used to think the only way to survive was to keep everyone at a distance. But that's not strength, it's loneliness in disguise." Ethan met her eyes, vulnerability raw in his expression. "I didn't think I deserved anyone worrying about me. That's what the job teaches you. Detach, endure, move on." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "True strength is letting someone care enough to stay. It's not weakness to need help. It's human." The days grew warmer, the pace of recovery matching the soft rhythm of spring beyond the window. Amelia taught Ethan how to manage the bandages himself, how to listen to his own limits. They laughed at small things. The taste of burnt toast, the way Leo stole Ethan's socks, the ancient pipes that rattled whenever someone used the sink. Healing was not just medical, it was the slow, patient construction of a new normal. One evening, as she knelt to check his stitches, Ethan brushed a lock of hair from her eyes and whispered, "You saved me, Amelia. Not just from the people hunting us, but from myself." Later that night, while the fire snapped in the grate, Amelia watched Ethan and Leo lying together on the faded rug. The dog's head rested on Ethan's thigh, eyes blinking slowly, utterly content. "You know," Amelia mused, voice low, "for all the training and missions and secrets, I think this is what he needed most. A place where the only thing expected of him was to be loved." Ethan nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "He was my shield when I had nothing left. I owe him everything." She turned to Ethan. catching a softness in his eyes she'd never seen before. "You said you kept something hidden. A ring. A promise. Will you tell me about it?" Ethan hesitated, pain flickering across his face. "It's all I have left from a life I almost forgot. The only thing that proves I was ever anything but a weapon for someone else's cause." He drew in a shaky breath. "Elizabeth? She made this place feel like home. She taught me that being safe isn't the same as being alive." Amelia took his hand again, steady and sure. "We build new memories on top of old scars. That's what healing really means." Leo shifted, pressing against both of them, a silent witness to the exchange. The three of them sat together, the world outside receding, until all that was left was the small circle of warmth they had built with their own hands and hearts. Ethan looked down, twisting the old silver ring on his finger. "Sometimes I dream I'm back in that world. Guns, betrayals, shadows. But when I wake up here, I realize I can choose something different." Amelia smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Choose life, even when it would be easier to hide." She rose, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead, then leaned down to hug Leo. "We're all survivors here, and we're not alone anymore." The night drew on, quiet and peaceful. In the flickering light, the old wounds faded to memory. Healing, Amelia realized, was not found in medicine or in running from pain. It was in letting herself feel, in allowing someone to matter again. Leo's tail thumped softly, Ethan's breathing grew slow and even, and the cabin finally felt like a home. As the fire burned low, Ethan broke the silence with a whisper meant only for Amelia. "Let me tell you about LA, about why I made those promises, and what they still mean." She nodded, ready at last to share in the truth that had bound him for so long. In that moment, the last wall fell. What remained was something simple, enduring and strong enough to carry them through whatever came next. Ethan sat hunched near the fireplace, eyes tracking the orange and blue flames as if searching for an answer in their restless shapes. The cabin had settled into a hush, broken only by the steady tick of an old clock and the gentle exhale of wind against the walls. Amelia brewed tea, her hands finally steady after days of adrenaline. She sensed a shift in Ethan, a readiness that hadn't been there before, the last of his defenses finally giving way to exhaustion, trust, and maybe the hope that secrets could be shared without destroying what was left. She passed him a mug and, after a silence, asked quietly, "What did L.A. really stand for? Was it just a code, or was it someone real?" Ethan took a long sip, eyes drifting to the ring he now wore again. His thumb turned it slowly, the engraved letters catching the firelight. Elizabeth Lynn Avery. She wasn't an agent or anyone the agency cared about. She taught third grade, used to rescue stray dogs and bring them home. She loved stories where the smallest character changed the world. His voice cracked, but he kept talking, holding on to the memory as if afraid it might slip away. "She was the bravest person I ever knew, not because she fought, but because she cared even when it hurt." Amelia listened, letting the story unwind at its own pace. "I always thought the job would break me first," Ethan said, voice thin but determined, "but it was the emptiness after she died that nearly finished me. The only way I kept going was by keeping a piece of her close. Something real, something human, to remind me what I was fighting for." He glanced at Leo, whose head rested on his foot, eyes shut but still alert to every change in the room. "When I realized how much trouble I was in, when I saw what people would do to get leverage, I hid the ring in the only place no one could take it from me, not for the secrets, but so if I disappeared, someone might find it and return it to her family. That's why the lock, why the scars." Amelia felt her chest tighten with the truth of it. Ethan hadn't been hiding classified files or evidence. He'd been protecting the only part of his life that had meaning, a promise made and nearly broken by grief. The fire cast their shadows, large and uncertain, on the cabin wall. Amelia's mind spun back through everything, the paranoia, the running, the coded messages, and late-night escapes. "All this time, I thought you were hiding from your past, but you were just trying to hold on to it." Ethan shook his head, a sad smile twisting his lips. It's easier to be a ghost than to admit you need something you can't get back. I tried to outrun the pain, the memories, the guilt that I couldn't save her, but Leo wouldn't let me give up. Every morning he waited by the door, ready to start again no matter how bad it got. She moved closer, drawn by the raw honesty she'd rarely seen in anyone. You think it makes you weak? Carrying this? She gestured to the ring, the battered notebook, the old photographs. Doesn't. It makes you someone worth saving. Ethan let the words settle, his eyes shining in the low firelight. Elizabeth used to say, "Real courage is loving without a safety net." I thought the job required sacrifice. She taught me that building a life, trusting anyone, was the real risk. His fingers closed over the ring, voice suddenly fierce. Every decision I made since she died I made for her, to make her proud, to keep her legacy from being swallowed by the world I lived in. I wasn't always right. I hurt people, but I never let go of that promise. The silence grew, thick with memories and regrets, but also with hope. Amelia realized her own fear of attachment mirrored Ethan's, both of them experts at survival, both haunted by what they might lose if they let anyone close. She touched her own scar, an old wound from a car crash years before, and felt the room close in, not with danger, but with the gravity of two people finally being seen. Maybe we're both guilty of thinking love is a weakness, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But what if it's the only thing that lasts when the rest is gone? Leo shifted, pressing closer to both of them, his steady warmth bridging the distance left by old losses. Ethan turned the ring again, the initials glinting. After she died, I tried to be the man the world needed, a fixer, a shadow, someone who could disappear and leave no trace. But that was never who she loved. I was always supposed to come back home. He smiled, rough but genuine. And now, for the first time in years, I want to. Amelia reached over, fingers brushing his. You don't have to be alone, Ethan. Neither do I. They sat together, the fire burning low, sharing the kind of silence that didn't need filling. The old dog rested between them, his presence more powerful than words. It became clear then that all their running had brought them, finally, to a place where the past could be mourned and let go. The ring was no longer a symbol of grief, but of survival, a promise that what was lost could still shape what came next. The scars weren't just reminders of pain, but proof of endurance and of the possibility of a new beginning. Ethan squeezed her hand, steady for the first time. Thank you, Amelia, for staying, for understanding, for fighting with me instead of for me. She smiled back, certain in a way she hadn't been in years. No more ghosts, no more hiding. The flames in the fireplace guttered lower, but in their place, something warmer grew. A sense of belonging, tentative but real. In that quiet, under the watchful eyes of Leo, they accepted that being vulnerable was not the end of the story, but the only way to start again. As the wind picked up and night deepened, Amelia and Ethan, both marked by loss, both stitched together by courage and the loyalty of a dog, began to imagine what healing might look like together. The next day would bring new challenges, but tonight they had the truth and each other, and for the first time it felt like enough. Spring crept in quietly around the old cabin, thawing the last traces of winter and flooding the woods with new life. Sunlight found its way through tall pines, touching the porch where Leo sprawled, his muzzle gray, but his eyes bright with contentment. The scars on Ethan's body had faded, leaving only thin reminders beneath fresh skin, and the deep shadows around his eyes had lifted. Each morning, Amelia found him awake before dawn, sipping coffee and sketching plans for their day. For weeks, they'd moved through a rhythm that felt strange but safe. Breakfast with Leo at their feet, hands working side by side on repairs, laughter echoing through the trees as they sanded splintered wood and argued over measurements. It was not the life either had planned, but it was the one they chose. On a quiet afternoon, the peace of their new world was tested. A pair of dark SUVs wound their way up the dirt road, tires crunching on gravel, and 3 agents stepped out, No weapons drawn, but authority unmistakable in every movement. Amelia's stomach clenched, but Ethan's face stayed calm. He met them at the porch, Leo close but silent, eyes never leaving the men. "Mr. Ryder," the lead agent greeted, "we've come on behalf of the Bureau. There are offers to reinstate you, new programs, witness protection if you want it. Your story could help us clean up what's left." The subtext hung heavy. Vindication, status, a return to the world Ethan had given everything to protect. Ethan glanced at Amelia, her hand tightening on Leo's collar. He shook his head, voice steady. "I'm not interested in medals or parades. I've done my part. My contract is finished." The agents pressed, promising resources, security, a chance to make things right on a national stage. Ethan cut them off. "You want my advice? Take care of your people before it's too late. Don't ask me to walk back into a life that already took everything from me." The lead agent nodded, conceding more respect than argument. "You know where to find us. You're owed a new start, Ryder. Take it." Ethan's only reply was a simple, "I already have." Amelia watched relief and resolve mingle on his face, pride warming her in a way no official protection ever could. After the cars vanished, Ethan leaned on the porch rail, staring into the woods. "They'll come back," he said, half to himself. "There's always one more threat, but I can't let that rule me anymore." Amelia nodded, sharing the weight and the freedom of that truth. They walked together to the old, half-collapsed doghouse at the tree line, the one Ethan had built for Leo years before but never finished. They stood at the end of the drive. The boards were warped and moss had crept up the base, but Ethan's hands were sure as he sketched out plans for a new structure. "We'll build a shop," he said, "somewhere for me to work, somewhere for you to fix up your rescues, something that lasts." It wasn't an apology for the past, but a promise for the future. Day by day, the work took shape. They cleared brush, salvaged usable wood, and spent hours side by side, fitting beams and pounding nails. Leo supervised every step, sometimes dozing in the shade, sometimes nosing through the scrap pile for a forgotten toy. In the evenings, Ethan taught Amelia how to carve small things, handles for tools, a new tag for Leo's collar, even a ring box for the battered silver band he still wore. "It's not about forgetting," he said one night, handing her a sanded piece of cedar. "It's about making something out of what's left." Amelia smiled, understanding that survival was not just a matter of outrunning old threats, but building new reasons to stay. News drifted to them in fragments. Cross was convicted, the Bureau purged, scandals exposed and then replaced by fresh headlines. For Ethan and Amelia, the world shrank to what they could hold: the scent of sawdust, the rhythm of shared meals, Leo's sighs as he settled each night between their beds. They learned to trust the stillness, to savor the chance to build something instead of always preparing to run. One morning, Ethan found Amelia in the garden, coaxing new shoots from the stubborn earth. He knelt beside her, dirt under his nails, and pressed his forehead to hers. "Thank you," he murmured, "for fighting for a future I didn't think I deserved." It was not lost on either of them how quickly safety could vanish. But every day they spent building, preparing the roof, finishing the windows, teaching Leo to fetch tools instead of tracking danger, proved that a life worth living was made from small acts of courage, not just grand gestures. Ethan repurposed the old doghouse into a workshop, teaching himself to turn chaos into order. Amelia hung her veterinary diploma by the door, next to the battered notebook and the framed photo of Ethan, Elizabeth, and a much younger Leo. Their home filled with evidence of new beginnings: handmade chairs, garden beds, shelves of canned food, and stacks of notes about future projects. One night, as a gentle rain tapped the tin roof, Ethan handed Leo a new collar, hand-stitched, sturdy, with a brass tag that simply read, "Family." He pressed the old silver ring into Amelia's hand, his voice clear. "I kept my promise to her. Now I want to make one to you. No more hiding, no more half-lived lives. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Amelia blinked back tears, the truth settling in her chest like sunlight after a storm. She nodded, slipping the ring onto her finger. "We choose each other. That's enough." The next day, as Leo ran ahead into the green tangle of the woods, Ethan watched Amelia at work in the new shop and realized that, for the first time in years, his choice was not about running or fighting, but staying. In a world built from chaos, they had chosen each other, chosen hope, and built something no threat could ever erase. And as Ethan gathered the courage to reveal his final promise, one meant not for the dead, but for the living, the story of survival quietly became a story of belonging. The seasons would turn, trouble would come and go, but for now, the only thing that mattered was the life they created with their own hands and the promise that nothing would break it again. Ethan's hands were raw and splintered by the time he finished the swing, but he wore the exhaustion with a quiet pride. The last bolt clicked into place just as the evening turned golden. Stretching the shadows across the porch, he stepped back, testing the weight, then nodded to himself, satisfied. This was not the kind of victory the old Ethan would have chased. No headlines, no applause, just the knowledge that something lasting had been built with care. Amelia watched from the doorway, a mug in hand, the sweet scent of lemon balm drifting through the air. Leo dozed nearby, one ear twitching with every creak of the wood, his fur dappled by sunlight. She caught Ethan's eye and smiled, understanding that this moment was more precious than any they had stolen during the chaos of their old lives. After cleaning up, Ethan disappeared briefly into his workshop and returned with a small, hand-carved box. The wood was polished smooth, Leo's paw print engraved on the lid with a careful, loving touch. He held it out to Amelia, his expression earnest but steady. "I made this for you," he said. "For us." Her hands trembled as she took it, heart pounding with the anticipation of 1,000 untold words. She opened the box, breath catching as she saw what lay inside. The battered silver ring, the letters L.A. still etched deep and sharp, and beside it a new ring, simple but sturdy, with the word "pack" engraved inside the band. Ethan lowered himself onto the swing, patting the space beside him. Amelia joined him, the swing creaking gently under their weight. For a long moment they sat in silence, Leo resting his head on Amelia's knee, eyes bright with a dog's unspoken wisdom. Ethan turned the rings over in his hands before looking at Amelia, voice low but unflinching. "There are 1,000 ways people try to measure love. Marriage certificates, contracts, even the scars they collect. I spent years promising to protect someone who's gone, fighting ghosts I couldn't touch. I nearly lost everything chasing old debts." He paused, pressing the old ring into her palm. "But I'm done letting the past decide what I owe the future." He picked up the new ring, holding it out, not in the rigid formality of a proposal, but with an honesty that made the air crackle between them. "I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to choose this. Choose us. I want to sign a contract that means something different this time, not a deal with the Bureau. Not a promise built on fear, but a vow to protect happiness, to defend this peace. If you say yes, we're not two survivors anymore. We're a pack. Whatever comes, we don't run alone." The weight of the moment pressed into Amelia's chest, not as a burden, but as a release. She looked at the old ring, the symbol of a promise kept even when hope felt impossible, and then at the new ring, clean, unburdened, waiting for a future she could shape herself. She slipped both onto her finger, one after the other, feeling the history and the hope settle side by side. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I want this. I want to be a part of something that isn't about surviving but living. I thought being alone was safer, but it was just emptier. I'm not afraid to belong anymore." Ethan's shoulders dropped, a tension releasing that he had carried for years. He took her hand, squeezing it hard, and looked at Leo. "You hear that, buddy? We're officially a pack now." Leo wagged his tail, a deep, contented rumble vibrating through his chest. Ethan pulled a new leather collar from his pocket, embossed with a single word: "Pack." He knelt and buckled it around Leo's neck, fingers lingering on the brass tag that bore no name, just 2 words, clear and final: "Pack." always. As the swing rocked gently, the world narrowed to the circle they had made together. The scars of old battles remained, but so did the lessons. Amelia leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, closing her eyes and breathing in the scent of wood smoke and spring grass. For so long, she had believed healing meant forgetting what hurt, scrubbing away the marks of loss and starting over. But here, with Ethan's arm around her and Leo's steady presence at her feet, she understood the truth. Healing wasn't about erasing pain, but about finding someone willing to share it. She spoke quietly. Her words meant as much for herself as for the two souls beside her. You taught me that strength isn't standing alone, is letting someone stand with you, even when it's hard, even when you're scared. Ethan kissed her hair, his voice thick. You made me believe I could have a life after all this, that I didn't have to prove anything to the world, just to the people I love. Leo barked softly, as if seconding the promise, and the three of them laughed, the sound ringing out into the evening. They sat like that for a long time, the sun slipping lower, golden light painting the world new. Night fell, but fear did not return. The swing creaked, Leo's tail thumped a steady rhythm, and the wounds that once seemed insurmountable shrank beneath the weight of daily kindness and shared burdens. They talked long after darkness settled, about the future, about what it meant to build a home from broken pieces. Amelia said, I used to worry about being needed. Now I worry I might never give enough back. Ethan squeezed her hand. You've already given me more than I ever thought possible. More than any medal, more than any redemption story. They made quiet plans for the coming days, a garden for the summer, new shelves for the kitchen, maybe another rescue or two to add to the family. The house would never be perfect, but it would be theirs. Each morning would start with Leo's cold nose and the promise of another day together. They knew trouble could return. The world had taught them not to take peace for granted. But every time a shadow fell across the yard, every time memories tried to steal their joy, they would find comfort in the simple touch of a hand, the press of a muzzle, the certainty that none of them would face it alone. Sitting in the dark, Amelia remembered something her mother once said. A home isn't built with locks and alarms. It's built with trust and the courage to let yourself be seen. She understood that now, in a way she never had before. Ethan glanced at her, a question in his eyes, and she shook her head, smiling. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. The swing rocked on, long after the last light faded. Leo dozed, dreaming of forests and open fields, his collar glinting in the moonlight. In the morning, there would be new work, new challenges, maybe even new scars, but there would also be laughter and pancakes, and the quiet certainty that healing was a journey, not a destination. Every paw print in the mud, every dent in the old swing, every mark left by their hands and their hearts was a testament, not to perfection, but to presence, to showing up again and again for each other. Their story, in the end, was not about loss or rescue, not about running or hiding. It was about the slow, hard work of becoming a family. The promise was not to keep each other safe from all harm, but to face whatever came together. The old contract had been signed in fear and blood. The new one was sealed in laughter, kindness, and shared mornings. It was a vow written not in legal language, but in every gentle gesture, every hard-won trust. In the quiet that followed, Amelia looked at Ethan and Leo and understood the real miracle wasn't survival or justice or even forgiveness. It was the simple decision to stay, to choose each other day after day with all their flaws and fears and strengths. She whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Back, always. Leo's ear twitched and Ethan squeezed her hand once more. Healing, she realized, doesn't come from erasing the past. It comes from building something worth carrying it for. Every scar, every story, every shared silence was proof of their courage. After all the storms, after all the doubts, they had found their home, not in a place, but in the stubborn, steady presence of love. And after every paw print, after every promise, there would always be the vow that mattered most: to belong, and to never let go. In the end, Amelia understood that healing wasn't about erasing pain or outrunning the past. It was about choosing to stand by someone, human or dog, when they had nothing left but hope. Ethan learned that true strength came from allowing others in, even when every instinct screamed to keep them out. Leo found his peace not as a tool, but as family. The scars remained, but so did the love, and that made all the difference. What would you have done in Amelia's place? Have you ever found healing through an unexpected bond? Or stood by someone when it mattered most? Share your story or thoughts below. If this touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Your voice matters here.